Next matter on the agenda is Senator Hall's file, Senate File 3912. Senator Hall, to your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. As I start out with Senate File 3912, I'd like to move the A2 amendment.
And Senator Hall, is that an author's amendment?
It's a delete all authors amendment. Yes, sir.
Senator Hall moves the author's amendment A2. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The motion passes. The amendment is adopted. Senator Hall.
Thank you, members. The A2 amendment we are looking at is, as I said, a delete all amendment. This is a bill on cops and cameras for the light rail transit. It is our number one priority to keep our public safe. I'll go through this bill just in general. If you have specific questions, I'm sure I can go further into that or ask our legal department for help. The bill starts out with a legislative report that the Met Council must submit annually. There's a list of those things required in subsection 16. And then we'll go to section 2, which has the minimum standards. Light rail transit vehicles must have a camera that is capable of recording the operator and the interior of the vehicle near the operator. This section is effective August 1st, 2020, applies to existing and new light rail transit vehicles. Section 3 talks about staffing, and the Met Council must not reduce the number of Metro Transit officers, keeping above average for the last 3 years. It also gives the effective day for final enactment. Section 4 talks about the paid fare zones. The Metropolitan Council must establish and clearly mark paid fare zones at stations and stops where there is a barrier-free or self-service fare collection. Again, it gives the effective date of August 1st. Section 5 talks about a mandatory ban. If a person is convicted of a crime that was committed in or on the transit facility, they can be banned from using the Metro Transit for 6 months if you've got a misdemeanor and up to a year if you have a felony. And then the section 6 talks about additional police officers being used on the transit and the funding for that coming from what Met Council was looking at funding their Metro Transit ambassadors. So with that, I know there are other testifiers. I'm not sure, Mr. Chair, if you want to go to the other testifiers or you want discussion.
Thank you, Senator Hall. I think at this time we'll go to the other testifiers, have everyone testify that wants to, and then we'll go to member questions. The first individual I have on the list for testifying is the chair of the Met Council, Mr. Zelli. Mr. Zelli, welcome to the committee. Nice to see you again in a different role. Please identify yourself for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am Charlie Zelli, Chair of the Metropolitan Council, and it's good to be back before your committee in a different role, but on important issues. I'm going to make some brief comments, but generally, maybe a few specific items, but I'm not going to really respond line by line, but other than to really express my appreciation of Senator Hall and frankly, many senators that some of whom I've met with, like Senator Jasinski and others, and frankly, I think a bipartisan interest that we've heard to help Metro Transit lean into enforcement to create a safe operating environment. I've testified, and I've been pretty public about our priority, our highest priority, to create safety within our trains and our buses. And when I say trains, I mean platforms, the entire customer experience. We are in the customer service business, and keeping a self-welcoming environment, which we can do better. We can do a lot better. And having 35 years operating a transportation business, I understand that without that, you don't have a business. And frankly, Metro Transit must and does play such a key role for our metropolitan economy that we need to take very specific actions. And some of those actions require help with the legislature. So we kind of overall really appreciate a couple of elements. One, to be able to actually have a practical, pragmatic approach toward fare violations, being able to give administrative citation to those not paying fares is really important, because we know the way we are handling it now doesn't work. And by actually having a clarity to have transit enforcement be by enforcement officers, in addition to sworn peace officers, would be a great enhancement. We know it works in other areas of the country. By having a larger presence, by having eyes and ears on the trains, on the platforms at all times, really is, I think, key to helping lean into enforcement. The several aspects, just to clarify, are ones that we're doing. We have already increased our Metropolitan Police presence on the trains and the platforms that we've taken from our transportation reserves. We have already ordered and are going to be implementing live video streaming within all of our trains. We currently have that on the platforms, but we don't have it on the trains, and we will, we believe, in due course, have the ability to monitor every train car from a central location. We've already increasing the staff of those that are monitoring both that and our special texting for help program. A couple of things that we also have. We actually have a code of conduct. Our issue is to actually enforce that code of conduct. We'll be doing a number of things soon. We're going to put a lot bigger spotlight on what that code of conduct is. There are stickers, frankly. I don't think people see them. We're going to make them bigger. We're going to make them more presence. And with this help to have more eyes and ears and people on the trains, we'll be able to actually point to the sign, start actually enforcing conduct in a more consistent manner. We actually have no paid zones within our platforms. They're clearly marked. We actually have them in our platforms. And yet, we have fallen off on the ability to enforce them. We, with this help, by having more presence on the trains, on the platforms, will be actually able to enforce some of the existing no paid zones that are a number of different locations. We know there's some hot spots. We are now increasing our police presence on those zones, in those platforms we know that have some data would suggest have more infractions. But having, again, a larger force of people, both our transit police and transit officers, ambassadors, we have less concern about the name and more concerned about actually having the people out there to be able to be a presence. So generally, we feel like we have a growing kind of alignment and consensus toward that we need to take action, and we know the legislature is really key to some of those pieces. I will just react kind of quickly to one element of the amendment that just came through, that we have additional funding to provide for police officers. We're all for new police officers. I just want to remind the committee that we have a structural deficit that we have that we will need to address the next budget cycle. And without additional resources, just even to operate the buses and the trains, we don't have the resources to pay on an ongoing basis increased police presence without increased funding. So I would be remiss if I didn't mention that, Mr. Chair. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have a couple of other folks that want to come forward and testify. Are you able to hang around for a little bit if members have questions?
Yes, I'd be happy to.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have next on the list a Shannon Watson. She would come forward at this time.
Good to see you.
Ms. Watson, welcome to the Transportation Committee. Please
you.
state your full name and proceed with your testimony, please.
Awesome. Thank you, Chair Newman, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Shannon Watson. I am the Director of Public Affairs for the St. Paul Area Chamber of Commerce. We represent the business and employer community primarily in the East Metro, but we have specific interest in areas that affect regional connectivity, which this is one. I came here to testify in favor of this bill, unfortunately in the part that was just removed. So I'm going to speak to that because that is the part that it was of specific interest to us. The members that I represent look at this proposal through their experience running a business, and they know that effective organizations deploy their resources in the most efficient way. Creating an enforcement officials program to free up sworn officers to deal with more serious crimes as only they can is an efficient use of resources. Any official, a sworn officer, a enforcement official, they are a visible deterrent for both the nuisance behaviors that degrade the transit experience for other riders, and then they also allow time and attention to emphasize consistent, fair compliance. This is an opportunity to make our public transportation system experience worthy of the constituents it serves. The first step in solving any problem is recognizing that there is one, which is why we appreciate leadership acknowledging that this is a challenge right now. I applaud the Senate for bringing this forward and engaging in this conversation with the House and the Met Council to try to solve a problem that many of us are dealing with when we're talking about recruitment, when we are talking about economic connectivity, when we were talking about the competitiveness of this region. This is a problem that we need to solve. Revenue from fares is an essential part of the budget for Metro Transit. Enforcing participation from everyone riding is a necessity, but again, having sworn officers writing tickets, most of which that are currently, as the fee structure is now, are not enforced and they're not paid. They're not prosecuted and they're not paid. When there are other more urgent issues that transit police can be dealing with, let's let them do that. Let's find a way to make this an efficient system that is cost effective and is effective for our riders. I would encourage support of this bill. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. The next testifier I have on the list is Mr. William Schroer. Welcome to the committee.
Senator Newman, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you.
Please state your name in full and proceed with your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Senators, for having me. My name is William Schroer. I'm the Executive Director of East Metro Strong. We're a public-private partnership between Washington and Ramsey counties, 8 East Metro cities, large employers including 3M and Alina, and Ms. Watson from the Chamber of Commerce is also a member. When these proposals were first floated in response to, as Chair Zelli pointed out, some ongoing problems, our members asked if there had been experience with similar programs in other regions of the country, and Chair Zelli alluded to the fact that they have had some success. I wanted to bring to this committee the results of the research that we have done in response to the questions that I got from our members and about experience elsewhere and share that with you in the course of your deliberations. I believe that a handout was included in your packet, and I just would draw your attention to that briefly, and I'll highlight a couple of things for your consideration. On page 1, I want you to draw your attention to the fact that when we talk to other...
One moment, Mr.
Oh, absolutely, sure.
Senator, could one of the pages get Senator Hall a copy
I'm sorry.
of the
Or you can
document that the testifier is referring to.
They'll give me one.
I apologize for the interruption. Please continue.
Not at all. Thank you very much. So we did three things in our research. We reviewed national best practices as those have been written up in the literature, and then we talked to chiefs of police and public safety at a couple of other transit agencies. And as others have noted, there are a lot of different concerns at play here. There's fair enforcement concern, there's code of conduct concern, there's a variety of issues. We were primarily interested in safety. We are concerned about fare collection and those things as well, but primarily about safety. So we talked to the directors of public safety. And then because we have some experience with, again, as Chair Zelli said, you can call them ambassadors or anything else. We have some experience with ambassadors here in the region. We also talked to the downtown ambassador programs that are run here in Minneapolis and St. Paul to see what they might have to tell us. On page 2, you'll see a list, and this is only an example list, this not an exhaustive list of other regions and agencies that that split, as Ms. Watson said, the policing function and other functions. So that might be fair enforcement, might be code of conduct enforcement, might be general assistance. And most of these treat fair non-payment with a separate staff and as a separate issue using civil and administrative citations. I would also emphasize that everybody that we talk to, and whether we talk to them or just read about them, work very closely with the police. This is not letting the police and these staff work separately, but it's a very layered and collaborative process. And to a person that we spoke to or read about, they say that this kind of collaboration and putting extra eyes and ears on the system for non-police purposes ends up increasing public safety, even if that's not the formal job description of, say, a fair enforcement officer. That fair enforcement officer, by their presence, ends up increasing public safety. On the next page, because fair enforcement is also a related concern, we reviewed national best practices for fair enforcement, and you probably know this being on this committee, the National Academy of Sciences has a Transportation Research Board arm. They do a lot of national research on best practices, and their recommendations for the fair side of this is to use a customer-oriented enforcement approach rather than traditional policing. And to create a fair inspection team with non-sworn officers. So that's on the fare collection side, but it relates back, obviously, to the safety side as well. Next page, what we learned is, and I have just a stack of really interesting stories, which I'm not going to share with you, but have been sharing, obviously, with staff at Metro Transit, that adding non-police staff let police focus on policing. And that those non-sworn staff act as a presence and as a force multiplier that deter and reduce crime, and everybody agrees on this fact. A little bit counterintuitively, point 2, more police do not necessarily make a place feel safer. And I will tell you just one short story, and then I want to respect time and end up and finish up, but I want to share this story. The Downtown Improvement District here in Minneapolis is led, their safety team is led by someone who, a former executive from Target in security, and he said, look, you know, we don't flood our stores with police. We obviously care a great deal about security in our stores. We have security guards in places, but we have a hospitality culture, and that creates the safety, and they're doing the same thing in downtown Minneapolis as well. And that's the last page then, that the results, they felt very strongly that the results from the Downtown Ambassadors programs validates the idea of splitting policing and other fair enforcement and code of conduct enforcement, et cetera. They emphasize, and this is probably obvious, but I want to just draw it to your attention, put the people in uniform. That makes them visible and makes and really multiplies the force and the presence. There's a role for plainclothes folks as well, but make sure that the police folks are also in uniform. Thanks for the time and the ability to share with you briefly some of the results of our research. I'd love to share them more broadly, but we're strongly in favor of additional investment in having folks on the system, both for safety purposes and for other purposes as well. And we're in favor of it in large part because it works so well elsewhere. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your testimony. Is there anyone else in the room that wishes to testify either for or against the bill? Please step forward.
Mr. Chair, just before he leaves.
Senator St. John.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and to the witness. When we're speaking of non-sworn officers, are we speaking of look-alike officers? I mean, they have the visible appearance of law enforcement, or are they plainclothes people?
Mr. Schroer.
Mr. Chair, Senator St. John, thanks. Good question. Generally speaking, the answer is no, in fact. Most other agencies, the non-sworn staff, look substantially different. They don't look like fake police officers. And that is, again, part of creating a different culture, in which even though they don't look like police officers, they're the culture of welcome and presence that they creates the safety. But everybody was very clear that they don't have, and forgive the phrase, but it was just one that was used with me repeatedly without prompting. We don't have rent-a-cop look staff out there. That's not what we're trying to do. That doesn't work. It doesn't produce the results that you want.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I can't imagine that. I would opt for. It's like we put, at least in Rochester, we put cops in the schools that don't look like cops. They just walk around with suits. There's no visible deterrent at all. But that's just my opinion. So thank you.
Thank you, Senator St. John. We're going to finish with our last testifier at this time. And then, members, I'll come to you with, give you a chance to ask questions. To the testifier, you're not on my list, but please identify yourself and proceed with your testimony.
Thank you. My name is Christine Levins. I'm the Vice President of the Minneapolis Regional Chamber.
And
Mr.
would
Chairman,
you spell your last name, please?
Levens.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. The business community in our region believes a comprehensive transportation system, including a robust transit network, is an important part of keeping our economy strong. Transit is an issue with broad support. Our chamber took a statewide poll that found 58% of Minnesotans said they want to use transit more frequently. 74% of Minnesotans support making additional investments in transit, and that support is across party lines. But our transit system needs to be safe and accessible for everyone. That's how we support the goals of Senate File 3921. Unfortunately, some local transit lines have seen criminal activity that reflects what is happening in the broader metro area. As crime rates have trended upward across the Twin Cities metro, reports of inappropriate and criminal behavior have also increased on transit. Violence on public transit is unacceptable, but fortunately, these appear to be most rare events. Last year, Metro Transit provided 78 million rides, and an overwhelmingly majority of those rides were both safe and secure. Travel by transit is about 1/10 the traffic death or injury rate as automobile travel. Crimes involving private vehicles, including car thefts, vandalism, and road rage violence, are also far more common than those associated with public transportation. In fact, research shows that transit service improvements increase security by improving surveillance and economic opportunities for at-risk populations. Increased scrutiny by drivers, security cameras, passengers, and transit police make residential neighborhoods safer overall. Nevertheless, we should all work together to increase safety on our transit system. Our state and local governments have made significant investments in transit, and we must ensure that every rider feels safe. Business leaders support additional resources towards that goal. We believe in an all-of-the-above approach and hope that elements of Senate File 3912 can be combined with other transit-related safety measures that have been advanced this year. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your testimony. We'll now open it up to questions from members. I will parenthetically, however, say, in looking at the handout from the East Metro Strong group, it indicates that adding police staff does not necessarily make a place safer, whereas adding non-sworn staff does deter and reduce crime. That seems counterintuitive to me, that by not having police, crime would not be reduced. But that would be simply my thoughts. Questions from members? Senator Dibble.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to respond to that point, as well as Senator Senjum's earlier point, I don't think the argument, and maybe Mr. Schroer can correct me if I get this wrong, but I don't think the point is not having police. The point is having a professional presence to bolster and support the work of the police and not replicate the work of the police. And though it may seem counterintuitive, I think the research shows what is effective. And we see that idea in the proposal of the other body. And in fact, I was going to bring an amendment today to the original form of the bill. I didn't realize there was going to be a delete everything that eliminates this new class of worker, I think it was called the Transit Fare Enforcement Officer or something like that. I was going to bolster the work of that individual, those individuals, to reflect some of these ambassador types of duties and responsibilities. But maybe another place and another stop we can have that discussion a little more thoroughly. My question is about also the elimination of the administrative citation, which also is supported by the presentation from East Metro Strong and was in the original bill proposal and is being discussed in the other body. The argument there, Senator Hall, is that criminalizing fare evasion, is disproportionate to the nature of the crime. B, because of that, as those cases get referred to and through the criminal justice system, they more often than not are dismissed, so it's like doing nothing. And C, ensnares a lot of people, further embeds them more deeply into the criminal justice system, and these are the kinds of folks who we're trying to give tools and means of getting on the right path, and it just exacerbates this never-ending cycle. And with the administrative citation that's resolved at the administrative level, there's more enforcement, there's actual consequence that is delivered, so people are held more to account for fare evasion, and it helps address this part of the problem that we're seeing on transit, which is this general climate of social disorder that includes things like fare evasion. So what are your thoughts about that idea? It was dropped from your bill, or was that for a reason, or are you amenable to continuing that discussion?
Well, Senator and Mr. Chair. Okay, sure. Mr.
Senator
Chair.
Hall, it seems to me that fare evasion is a form of theft, and as such should be a crime. If you were to get into a taxi cab and ride in a taxi cab, not pay it, that's a crime. And I don't see a whole lot of difference between that and getting on a train or on a bus and not paying the fine. As to whether or not it's enforced, we in the legislature really don't have a lot of control over that. The enforcement has to do with the city attorney and the county attorney in whatever jurisdiction the ticket was issued. And they're the folks that have got to do the enforcement, not us. As to whether or not receiving a ticket for not paying a fare is going to ensnare someone into the criminal justice system, I just flat don't agree. You have got a choice as to whether or not you're going to pay that fare or not, and there is no ensnarement involved whatsoever, in my world. Senator Hall.
I think you said it real well, Mr. Chair. I might also add that I have a real hard time believing that we are keeping someone safe if they're an ambassador and they're not carrying a weapon. And I don't know who would do the job in the first place, who would put themselves in that type of jeopardy. Now, maybe it's not as bad as what I think, but once we get to a point where the problems aren't as big and aren't as severe as they have been lately, maybe we can adjust to that. Whether they look like a police officer or they look like an ambassador, I really don't care, but I need somebody, I think, that is carrying a weapon that would defend themselves and others. Because you're going to find unruly people, and what do? Well, you can make a phone call, but by that time, you may have more problems. So safety is, to me, first, and that's why, to me, it's worth putting out more money if we need to get the right kind of officers or protection that we need.
Senator Dibble?
Thank you. I'll just respond quickly, but I'm interested in Chair Zelli's response as well. A couple things. One is, we can state what we believe, and we can go with the research and what shows us what's effective and what's not. We have some evidence, that, and we have to live in the real world. These crimes are dismissed for a whole lot of reasons. The public defender makes the motion to dismiss. The judge agrees. We just have to live in the real world and really pursue policies that are shown to be effective. As far as the ambassadors go, again, let's go with the research and the evidence. And also, I got to tell you, I take the Green Line all the time. I took it last night. Let's not exaggerate what's going on. Judd Shetnin and Chair Zelli and Mr. Quistra and, Nora Slawick before, I probably, contact them once every couple of weeks with a report from either a friend of mine or my own experience of something that I don't like on the Green Line or on my bus. Usually it relates to, some kind of nuisance level issue of litter or dirty train or smoking or something like that. It's not pandemonium. It's not wholesale violence. We don't have to have guns in every car. And Senator Hall, I would just invite you to accompany the Mad Dads or the downtown ambassadors and see how they do their work. Their presence is a deterrent. Their ability, because they're coming from the community itself and they're respected elders and leaders, they're able to speak with, intervene, talk with, calm situations down, help people, refer them to assistance if they need it. They create, they add to this climate of better social order and our calming presence and an intervention if necessary. That's what the idea of ambassador is. Putting people in uniforms and throwing guns all over the place, that creates a sense of disorder and a sense of danger and doom. It has the opposite effect. We absolutely need cops, and they need to be working closely with ambassadors like this. But again, this is a way to address the problems that do occur. Everyone knows I've been very vocal. But let's try to pursue policies that are shown to be effective.
Senator Dibble, did you wish Senator Zelli to respond there? I didn't hear a question, so I'm not too sure whether you want me to recognize Commissioner or Chair Zelli.
Well, Chair Zelli came up to the table on his own initiative, so I think he has something to say.
Well, I invited him, actually, but go ahead, Chair Zelli.
Mr. Chair, Senator Dibble, thank you for the opportunity to address these two issues, which I think is really a helpful debate. And honestly, some of it may seem counterintuitive. Some of it actually makes sense based upon prior experience, both in other transit areas, but also right here in Minneapolis. And I think to kind of put a little bit more behind the two issues. One, about ambassadors or transit enforcement officers. These are not, to Senator Senjum's concern, going to be invisible or plain clothes. We actually have plain clothes Metro Transit Police who do a great service to help find and help behaviors and platforms and other areas, but that's something else. We would have very visible, very professional, high visibility uniforms. And they're there for a reason. One is to be a presence, to help create both in a non kind of law enforcement way, but a more of a human service way to ensure that people aren't smoking loud music. But most importantly, they're checking fares. And by having the ability to check for a ticket is in itself part of what it becomes understood that you can't get away with it. The common belief now is that people get away with it. Why? Because once a policeman issues a citation, the prosecutors are not prosecuting. Why? Because, and I'll get to that in a minute, but talking about these professionals who are Metro Transit representatives, they are not just wearing suits. They would be much more like the ambassadors for the Downtown Improvement District. Fortunately, we have Chief Rizal, who's here, was the precinct commander downtown for Minneapolis Police. As MnDOT commissioner, I actually visited and had a tour from his precinct and kind of went through with the cameras, went through how it works with the DID ambassadors. And the experience of Minneapolis, both from the police point of view and from the downtown council and the businesses who fund it, is that this is a very complementary and very effective way to ensure we have safety, a presence of comfort, and that ultimately people walking down the sidewalks in Minneapolis, whether they're visitors or office workers, or residents, feel safe. And they're just part of a component. They don't do everything. Would they be in trouble? I think they would be trained to the point of recognizing when there's a dangerous situation, they call for help. If they enter a dangerous situation, they have de-escalation training. I mean, this is a professional role. It is not putting somebody in danger. 99% of the time, this is just traffic, people using the light rail system. We have those that are very poor and late in the evening, which is a whole other issue, but they're not, and they may have some mental health issues. They're not necessarily dangerous. So I kind of create a better picture as to kind of what their role is and how they can be effective. It's a far more nuanced, but it is not new. We're not pioneering something that is our hope. It is actually proven kind of mechanism to create more professional eyes and ears and the presence of safety. So we're not advocating this or suggesting this to be hopeful. Yes, we're hopeful, but it's based upon actual experience and from professional transit planners and police departments that do this work. The second thing is the idea that not paying a fare is theft. And Senator, I couldn't agree with you more. It is. So is driving down a min-pass lane without paying for it. So is having an expired meter out on the Capitol and not paying for your time parking on a city street. There are actually rules about that theft. It's an administrative citation of parking tickets. There's administrative citations that Highway Patrol will for not payment of an express lane. There is in our world, when you're not paying the $2 or 25-cent fees, there are mechanisms to immediately collect, fine, and I think that the original proposal by Senator Hall is very clear that those fines are not minor, and they escalate, and they have ability to actually, ban them from the trains for periods of time. So I think that the penalty should fit the crime, but the legislature does have some authority to not just think about how a crime is prosecuted, they have a responsibility to think about the practical, pragmatic effect of policies. And in this case, when we only have 45 people who paid a fine this last year, out of 6,000 people who were stopped, cited with warnings, and 1,500 were given citations, to only have 45 people means the system's not working. I spoke recently with a Ramsey County prosecutor, and I described the situation. I said, what do you think as a prosecutor? And he said, are you kidding? We are so overwhelmed with personal assault, with aggravated violent situations. We're actually stretched where we are. We are going to ensure that those kind of criminal behavior gets its due course. But for us, as a county prosecutor, to spend time not paying a $2 fee, why don't you get the, why don't you go to the parking, they actually used it, the parking fee model. And I was like, well, thank you. That's actually what we're trying to promote. Absolutely theft, an appropriate way where we can collect it, we can ensure that if there isn't paying the fine, that there's a way to, through collection agencies and other means, to make sure that that the actual citation is enforced. So I can go on and on. I probably have overstayed my welcome, but on both those issues, we feel strongly there's a reason.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and perhaps we could explore adding this to the payables list as a way of resolving things. Senator Franzen.
I know Senator, thank you, Mr. Chair. I know Senator Dibble has some additional comments, but I raised my hand early on because I'm pretty disturbed about the penalties, and thank you, Chair Giseli, for pointing the penalties and all the collateral consequences of a lot of these penalties. But to Senator Newman's point, when the first time I went to Mexico and I saw an armed guard with a huge machine gun, I didn't feel safer. I actually felt unsafe. That's not our culture. Not here in the U.S., not here in Minnesota. You do see them more right now at the airport. We're living through different times, and people want to have a sense of security. I'm not saying that the intent of this bill is erroneous. I think we do have to acknowledge that we have to make sure that public places are safe and that people are paying their fair share. But the unintended consequences of this bill are pretty alarming for me. The mandatory ban, we don't legislate out of panic. We try not to. And when you're talking about 45 people who are paid the fine, I'd like to know how many people are actually getting a citation. I don't know if I have that information readily available. But to move to a gross misdemeanor, it's already been said, the punishment does not fit the crime. The collateral consequences of not just legal, but also day-to-day implications of people who relied on public transit to get to work, to pick up their kids, to get the groceries. And on top of that, the stigma and the systemic racism that we are contributing to with these penalties, it cannot be overlooked. Who are the people who rely on public transit the most? And what are we trying to do to fix it and get people out of poverty and get them to potentially own a car if they can? It's expensive to own a car. For students, we had a ton of students here earlier that left, but what if someone's just riding and, a young kid who's not paying their share, we're going to go on and give them a felony and a gross misdemeanor. And you know what consequences that has for kids' lives? Long term. I worked at the public defender's office as a law clerk. I read those police reports, and those will never leave that child until adulthood, and they have big consequences. So instead of going the route of penalty conviction, hammer hard, machine guns, and I don't know how far you want to go. I worked in downtown for many years. I am very familiar with the downtown council model, and I really appreciate that. You're building a relationship with people who walk that sidewalk every day. I worked at Target. You build a relationship for those asset protection people who are at the store every day. You build that rapport with the community. And my dad was a cop, but I'm sure others that are in the profession today can tell you that it makes a big difference when we are actually part of the community as law enforcement, not just to enforce, but to build community of safety. So I think this is going in the wrong direction. I really, really struggle with supporting this concept mainly because of that. I have a bill that actually works on the ambassador program, and I signed on to one for Senator Limmer, who's working on a county-wide public safety model as well. Let's look at those options and not just say that because we're going to increase a crime and a penalty that the issue is going to go away. In fact, it could exacerbate and have huge, long-standing inequities to our system and communities of color. And I just need to put that on the record that this is the wrong approach, and I hope that it's either being eliminated or really thought through of how that punishment really should fit the crime. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Franzen. Senator Howe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I will tell you that, I rode the North Star down here for about 10 months every day. And from there, I'd get on a bus, and sometimes I'd use light rail. But I will say that the only place that I ever seen anyone actually get their fare checked and actually watch some poor woman get a ticket was on the North Star commuter rail. And that woman got a $181 ticket for not having her fare paid. The rest of the time, well, I guess on buses, everybody pays on getting on the buses, but I see no one in that 10 months get checked on the light rail, not one. So, and we're sitting here talking about fares. I will say that I think that we need to take a look at, let's talk about the violent crime on the Metro Transit. And these are Metro Transit statistics, and we're looking from 2016 to 2019. We'll just talk about aggravated assaults. Went from 38 in 2016 to 150 in 2019. If you look at theft, it went from 380 in 2016 to over 633 in 2019. When you start looking at those types of numbers, I guess I'm thinking I would like to see an officer every once in a while on those. And I know we've got Chief Ezell here, but I would like to know if, given there's is there data on which routes have the more problems at what time of day, that we've got a rotating schedule of putting an officer on one of these routes every so often, and just sporadically to try and tone that stuff down? Or what are we doing? I mean, I'd like to see what the results are and what the response has been, because as I continue to use this sporadically, and when I sit there and watch the train go by, I don't see any uniformed officers, and have I never seen any uniformed officer on a light rail. I have seen them come and pull a guy off a bus once or twice when I was riding the bus, so that has happened. But he wasn't on the bus. The bus had to pull over and the transit officer came on board. So I would like to know why those transit officers, why we don't see them on the transit more often to deter this type of action.
Chair Zelli.
Mr. Chair, Senator Howe, we agree. And I know that Chief Frizzell, who's also relatively new, not as new as I am, but has been more thoughtful now with analyzing data and actually deploying some of our transit police to those areas where there's more frequency of some of the more aggravated issues and times a day. Presence, visibility is really key, and we couldn't agree with you more that part of our leaning into safety is about visibility. It's a number of different ways to get visibility. Officers are one. They're not the only one. Live streaming of cameras. So we're actually real time being able to respond when we see some bad behavior. The fact is we have a very robust footprint in our transit system. Not just the trains, but our 900 buses and our frequent stations, and with the police corps that we have covering 24 hours a day is stretched. There's no question. But if we doubled it, we'd still find times when you would take the Green Line and you wouldn't see a police officer. So we have to simply have all of the above. And when our idea is behind having a fair enforcement officer or a presence, it's just one of the many options that we know work in together. But we're not saying we shouldn't have police. We just know that police alone, our Metropolitan Transit Police alone can't solve that presence issue. But your point is well taken, and you should be seeing the presence of Metro Transit people.
Senator Osmond.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to respond some of the comments that were made, and Senator Howell hit something I was going to go after, which was, I mean, we're seeing crimes, aggravated assaults, theft. It's at least 2 a day, at least 2 a day. And it's getting worse. It's not getting better. It's getting worse from 2016 until today. So whatever we're doing now isn't working. I highly disagree, strongly disagree, that seeing an officer of the law with a holstered sidearm scares people. Maybe some it does. It certainly doesn't for me, because I know if I see that individual, I know that that is an officer of the law there to protect me. Not to shoot me, but to protect me and enforce the law. And just their presence there, and we're not talking about machine guns. We're talking about a simple sidearm that is actually buttoned, and you don't even really see it except for the butt that comes out the end. I mean, it really amazes me that we will misinterpret or mispresent what may happen in this case. We heard at the government Metropolitan Governance Committee, we heard from 2 train drivers. And the newspaper reported in very clear and precise terms as far as what they live with on a daily basis. And it's amazing that they continue to want to work in an environment that basically is unsafe. Just by doing what Senator Hall wants to do, just the presence, I'm not even going to talk about the fines. I'm not even going down that path. I disagree that we shouldn't be enforcing fines, but just doing this provides at least some safety for people that are not law-abiding, or are not lawbreakers. And the lawbreakers who see these people, and we may not have to have this program for an extensive period of time, but just seeing them is going to make them think twice about what they're doing when they're on a train. I mean, constituents coming from outside the metropolitan area have rightful concerns about what happens when you get onto a light rail train. And I think Senator Hall's direction in this is not based upon any racism or any other ism you can find. It has to do with safety, and I think the people of Minnesota are demanding it, considering the problem is getting worse, and if we don't address it now, it's just going to continue to get worse. So now is the time for us as the legislature to step up and say, we want security and we want a presence that makes the line graph, instead of going up and up and up with more, start going down. And this is one way to do it. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, one additional thing. I request a roll call vote and also request that this be printed in the Senate Journal.
Roll call granted. Do I see 3 hands to have it printed in the Journal? I do see 3 hands. Members, we are going to be bumping up against a hard stop. I have 4 senators who wish to address this matter, so I would ask that you please respect each other's time. And with that, Senator Dibble.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just kind of want to get everyone oriented again to the scale and scope of the problem we're talking about. Metro Transit provides something on the order of 90 million rides a year, about 250,000 rides a day. Just so we understand, absolutely, no one is talking about not doing anything. Some of what Senator Hall is proposing is broadly and widely supported. But we're also talking about doing things that are shown to be effective and that work. And some of those things are missing from Senator Hall's bill. We can talk about what we believe and what's intuitive and our perspective on this and that and the other question. But let's just go with the evidence and actually come together and gather around ideas and policies and initiatives and proposals that are shown to be effective. For example, I took the Green Line last night. Senator Howe, I saw cops on the train going easterly. I was going westerly. I get fare checked all the time. Mr. Shetland will tell you that I used to complain about never being fare checked, and it drove me nuts. Sure enough, now I get fare checked all the time. So I don't know why we can't legislate on anecdote. We have to go with evidence and what the agency tells us they're doing. Chair Zelle says, yes, we're putting more cops and they're drawing from their reserves, which begs a budgetary question that I'm about to raise in just a minute. But there isn't enough money because cops are expensive. We pay them good money, and there just isn't, and rightly so, and there just isn't enough money to put as many cops as maybe we would want. So let's do things like clean the stations. I was standing at the station out here. It's dirty. The pavement is dirty. It looks a little unkept, and some of the hardware is wearing out. That helps increase social order and helps with the atmosphere and helps with the kinds of behaviors. If you're riding a dirty train and getting on board on dirty stations, that sends a signal that this is a place where, social disorder and bad behavior is, maybe tolerated and accepted. That costs money. Let's clean those trains, like many times a day. Let's clean those stations many times a day. If you go to those cities where you feel comfortable and safe on their trains and their buses, they're spotless. It's because there's a high value in that community for people to feel safe and comfortable and secure. And one of the hallmarks is cleanliness. That's one of them. That costs money. Chair Zelle, can you answer a question for me? What is the current budget circumstance of the Metro Transit system? Are we adequately funding our operating needs, and what is our projection for operating needs into the coming years?
Chairman Zelle, a succinct answer, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Dibble, I don't have the exact number, but I believe the one-time funding has filled gaps for the end of this fiscal year and next, but the next budget cycle, we're looking at a kind of a systematic deficit of somewhere in the 60 million range, but then Metro Mobility is another deficit as well. So, and I will just quickly comment, you are correct. An undercapitalized system is unsafe and doesn't provide for the kind of efficiency of including cleanliness. We are doubling down with whatever reserve now we have on both enforcement and on cleaning, particularly in the period we're having with concerns about health.
Mr. Chair.
Senator Dibble, I would like to give the other three senators an opportunity before we have to move on the bill.
Well, I have an amendment to offer to this point. I can wait on that.
On this point, you want to offer an amendment?
Yes.
Please proceed.
I'll offer the A3 amendment, Mr. Chair. And Mr. Chair, I would request a roll call.
Roll call granted.
And Mr. Chair, I would request that, can we do the recording in the journal on amendments roll calls too?
Do I see three hands? I do see three hands.
All right, thank you. So, Mr. Chair, we're making, I mean, some of these things in Senator Hall's bill, Chair Zelli said we're already doing, but I know that they're doing that at great effort, kind of cannibalizing their prudent reserves. We're asking them to do more as well. Meanwhile, we've been delivering nothing but cuts to Metro Transit year over year. And you just heard about the projected deficit. So this would simply pay for at least the initiative to increase the number of Metropolitan Transit police officers from the general fund. Like I said, I request a roll call and have request that roll call be recorded in the journal.
Thank you, Senator Dibble. The only thing I would add is that this, of course, is not a budget year, and I am not aware of any funds at our disposal in the Transportation Committee at this time. Senator Hall, your response to the A3 amendment.
Well, I agree with you, Senator Chair. This is not a budget year, but to me, it comes to where we're going to put our money. And to me, public safety right now is utmost. And public safety on our transit systems have to be utmost. And I know everybody cares about that, but to me, to be able to put this money towards that would be important. So I would not be favorable to the amendment.
Senator Senjum.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Before I would vote on it, and I possibly could, but I'd like to know how many transit police officers there are that I happen to see just incidentally with driving down the street with the transit police type cars, and why aren't they on the train? So I'd want that question answered before I'd vote on this.
Mr. Zelli.
Mr. Chair, I might defer to the chief who can really give you an accurate number. I could get close, but I defer to Chief Rizal.
Welcome to the committee, Chief. Please state your full name and proceed to answer the question, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Eddie Frizzell, Chief of the Metro Transit Police Department. Last name spelled F-R-I-Z as in zero, E-L-L. We currently have 141 officers and 49 part-timers. That's spread out over 7 counties, well over 85 different communities, and we're a 24/7 agency. So to the former question, it's very hard with our current resources, where the GM has given us well over $650,000 to put overtime to spread out on some of the transit systems. And this year, they've already pledged another 1.8, which will give us another 20,000 man-hours to try to get more folks out there. But I want to stress that our force is stressed to the absolute max. Everyone's on deck, including myself, riding all the buses, trains, and light rails throughout the system.
Thank you, Chief. Nice to meet you.
Senator Senjum.
Thank you, Chief, for being here and for that answer. I'm still trying to understand the mathematics because, no disrespect at all, it's frequent, and I ride at least the Green Line more than people would know or frankly even expect. But I do, and I don't see officers on that very often at all. I'll just say that. So you're saying they ride on these buses and transit, trains, et cetera, but I don't see them. But I just ride the train. I don't go buses.
I would also ask or add that insofar as the A3 amendment is concerned, while we're talking about close to $2 million in additional funds to increase the number of transit police officers, there's nothing in this amendment that indicates that is where they would be deployed. And the bill that we are dealing with, of course, is specifically to address the situation on the Metro light rail lines. So I don't see that this amendment really addresses the problem at all. Senator Dibble.
Well, if you look at Senator Hall's Section 6, it doesn't say that either.
Any other questions or comments on the A3 amendment? Senator Friends.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just very briefly, I'm in favor of this amendment. I do agree with you, Senator Hall. Safety is of the utmost. That's what we're about in this committee on a lot of our bills. We debated safety yesterday when we talked about Highway 14. If we think it's of the utmost importance, we have to fund it. And for that reason, I would ask members to support the amendment out of the general fund. I realize we may not have a target yet, but I do think there is a budgetary balance or a surplus, if you prefer that term. And if it's important enough to protect Minnesotans that ride Metro Transit, I think it's important enough for us to vote this amendment favorably and get that money appropriated and increase public safety. Thank you.
Senator Carlson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I guess it's already been said, but, if we don't fund it, it's an unfunded mandate. I'm not, I don't want to ask the chair of what doesn't get done if we go ahead and pass the bill without the funding, but you know that something is not going to get done when you have an unfunded mandate. And I think Senator Dibble's amendment will erase that unfunded mandate. So I would support the amendment.
Any other questions or comments regarding the A3 amendment? Again, members, I'd indicate that the Transportation Committee does not have a target, does not have the money at this point, and I would ask members to, vote however you wish to vote on this. But insofar as the A3 amendment is concerned, the money is not currently in this committee. Senator Dibble.
We believe in you, our fearless leader. Go arm wrestle with Senator Rosen. Go get that money for us.
Senator Rosen are getting along pretty good, but not that good. Mr. Zender, if you would take the roll, please.
Chair Newman.
No.
Senator Anderson.
No.
Senator Carlson.
Yes.
Senator Dibble.
Yes.
Senator Franzen.
Yes.
Senator Frentz.
Yes.
Senator Hall.
No.
Senator Howe. Senator Jasinski.
No.
Senator Kent. Senator Klein.
Yes.
Senator Lang. Senator Little.
Yes.
Senator Osmek.
Yes.
Senator Rarick. Senator Senjum.
No.
Senator Kent.
There being 8 yes and 7 no, the motion is adopted and the amendment is adopted. Members, we've got 10 minutes and we have to be on the floor as I understand it. I have, where's my list? Senators Senjum and Carlson left on the list. I really would like to, Senator Carlson has waived, Senator Senjum.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'll be real quick. About 5-6 months ago, I'm at my apartment over to the Point here, 130, I think, units there. It's condos. Commissioner Ortega from the county is having a town meeting over there, and so I just drifted in. Room's full. For an hour and a half, all they talked about was this issue. That really strikes the residents out there, and I don't think we have to worry about them because they're not going to ride this train anymore. So that's just the way that is. But I just want to say this also. Everything is 5 months ago. I'm in Atlanta or so, and I get on the MARTA at the airport going downtown. I like to do that because you get a sense of the city if you ride the train. And I observe it's just clean. And then train starts, and I'm not sure exactly all it said, but it said something like, welcome to the MARTA, thank you for keeping the MARTA clean. Welcome to MARTA, thank you for not smoking. Thank you for using appropriate language. Thank you for those kind of things. And I think I heard that 20 times going from the airport to downtown Atlanta. And so you hear it enough, it does create some expectations. We could do that, and I don't know how much it would cost, but it wouldn't cost a lot. But I think, and I agree with Senator Dibble, creating these expectations are important. I was about 10 o'clock yet, it doesn't matter what time, but yesterday down at getting on the Nicollet Mall station coming back here, it is terrible. I mean, it needs to be power washed. That glass needs to be cleaned up. We have not set up a welcoming, expectation for transit riders here. We could do that without a lot of money, and we should. That Nicollet Mall station is like the getting off point for a lot of visitors coming into Minneapolis, et cetera, just beyond our own riders. I'll just leave it at that. I certainly support this bill. We need to do something. I'm a big boy, so to speak, and I can get on that train and not be bothered by a lot of things I see. But I do know there's a lot of people that are intimidated by what they see, and we ought to take care of, to the extent we can, those kind of concerns.
Thank you, Senator Senjum. Chief Purcell, thank you very much for being here today. Chair Zelli, thank you for being here. Senator Hall, this is your bill. Last word before your motion.
Well, I appreciate everybody's testimonies here. As I looked at the different issues, I think we agree on most of this. There's still some possible tweaking we could do, but I think safety for our families, for passengers, is on all of our minds. I will say that there's a big difference of an officer carrying a gun in Mexico, where I would also be afraid if it was Mexico, versus our officers here, who I have the utmost respect for. So with that, I would move Senate File 3912 as amended to
Recommended to pass and re-referred to the Committee on Judiciary.
to the Judiciary Committee.
Mr. Zender, take the roll call, please.
Chair Newman,
Yes.
Senator Anderson, Senator Carlson. Yes. Senator Dibble. No. Senator Franzen.
No.
Senator Frentz. Yes. Senator Hall.
Yes.
Senator Howe. Aye. Senator Jasinski.
Yes.
Senator Kent. Senator Klein.
Yes.
Senator Lang.
Yes.
Senator Little.
Yes.
Senator Osmek.
Yes.
Senator Rarick.
Yes.
Senator Senjum.
Yes.
Senator Anderson.
Yes.
Senator Kent.
Where's she? What's that?
There being 13 ayes and 2 noes, Senate File 3912 as amended, the motion passes and the file moves to the Committee on Judiciary. With that, our business is concluded, members, and we are adjourned.